BEAD funding has been kind of the buzzword in the digital equity space, and we've been seeing steady progress on this program throughout this year.
We're putting all the buzz of 2024 in context.
TFIC takes you deeper into the stories that are shaping the future of state and local government.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
You're not Buzz Lightyear.
I'm Siri.
And I'm Google.
And I am Alexa.
Alexa seems so smart. I think we'd have a lot to talk about.
Pew, pew.
From government technology and governing, this is the future in context. I'm Paul Taylor over here, and she's Ashley Silver over there. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, Paul. I'm just over here trying to uncover just how we're already nearing the end of 2024. Do you have any early New Year's resolutions in mind?
Oh, all the old perennial ones. Exercise more, maybe eat a little less. And, in the spirit of the company that we work for, do good work and make government better for folks. You? What about you?
All of those sound good and achievable. I don't know. I feel like people are pretty generic usually, and they'll have like these exercise goals and stuff. But I'm a person that kind of lives in the moment, so I'm already doing that. So I think I'm just gonna kind of, continue to make my work better here at eRepublic, of course, but kind of just play it by ear and take whatever comes.
Yeah, fair enough. I love the optimism in your statement that goals like making government better are achievable. Mm-hmm. There are some that would give you a side eye for that one.
Right.
I hold in my ink-stained hands a copy of Government Technology's Year in Review issue. The cover story features 17 pages of editorial goodness that look back at 2024 in terms of what IT did for and to state and local government.
Let's talk to the beat writers who covered the stories that mattered, including Jewel Pattison-Gordon and Julia Ettinger.
Julia, let's begin with you. In 2024, two little letters, 8 state and local government, AI. Help us unpack where it came from, how fast it got traction, and the progress made to date.
Absolutely. So it seems like we can't really get through a technology conversation in 2024 without talking about AI. Artificial intelligence is no longer some emerging technology tool on the horizon. It's here. Governments are using it. Government employees are using it. And at the same time, government is still trying to figure out the best way to regulate it. So we're in this interesting space with this technology right now.
Are there models?
Looking back a little bit, when you look at AI legislation at the state level, in 2009, there was one piece of state legislation introduced that included the word artificial intelligence. And in 2024, there's been at least 293 pieces of legislation that included the words artificial intelligence. So AI is not going anywhere.
How is it gaining traction on the ground in terms of moving from legislation to governance bodies to doing real things that affect people's relationship with their government?
It's definitely looking different in different states. There's not really a one-size-fits-all approach with AI at this time. We are seeing different states take different actions. So some states are implementing AI task forces. Other states like New Jersey have implemented an executive level AI position. States are implementing their own policies and guidance. And then there's also a lot of collaboration that we're seeing between governments. One notable example is the GovAI Coalition, which was started in 2023 in San Jose. And that coalition has now more than 350 agencies serving as members.
Do jurisdictions have the policy frameworks and the governance and structures in place that they are feeling comfortable doing real things at this point? Or are those also still a work in progress?
I think I would have to say those are still mostly a work in progress. Again, it does vary based on local or state government and then the actual government in question, as well as their constituents' needs. I think when it comes to AI, different states and localities are at different places in terms of readiness for implementation. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of where they are in terms of regulations and guidance, AI is being used. So even if they haven't effectively put in all the guidance, employees are likely already using AI. So I think that the best thing that they can try and do is try and catch up in terms of both AI governance as well as data governance, the other piece of that puzzle, in order to make sure that those implementations are safe and align with the organization's mission.
One of the things that we've seen this year, in addition to being a lot of wildfires as climate makes the news over and over again and devastates large swaths of land in various parts of the country, is AI being put to use in terms of wildfire detection. There's those kind of headline grabbing applications. And then there's the more mundane day-to-day stuff of government where AI is being used for permit approvals, which presumably makes things move quicker in localities across the country. All of that is to the good, but there are risks at hand. And one of the risks is in terms of inherent bias to the models that AI uses. What are the risks? What are the challenges as we look to the new year and the continued growth of AI adoption?
Absolutely. Well, as I said, AI is only as good as the data that it's trained on. So when it comes to AI and algorithmic bias, if the data or the data sets that an AI system is trained on are not inclusive or not an accurate representation of the people that they're supposed to be representing, then the risk for algorithmic bias is real. And that can, especially in terms of like hiring and things like that, it can really lead to some discriminatory outcomes. So that is a concern. The federal government is actually working with some external partners to try to better determine how AI's advancement can be made more inclusive for people with disabilities. So that is something that is underway and hopefully will continue. But when it comes to AI's use, I think one of the major risks that we hear from experts is cybersecurity. And of course, we do see positive uses of AI in the cybersecurity space as it can kind of help take the load off of humans in terms of threat detection. AI can also be used on the other side of the cybersecurity spectrum, whereas it can be used by bad actors who may make phishing emails increasingly harder to detect or other cases like that. And maybe Jewel can speak more on some of the AI-powered cybersecurity threats.
That is a really good segue. And Jewel, one word for you, CrowdStrike. What was the year like in 2024, particularly for governments that were clients of CrowdStrike?
Yeah, CrowdStrike is a really interesting example because it wasn't a cyber attack, but it had these massive implications and it demonstrated, an area where theoretically attackers could go after. This cybersecurity company issued a faulty content update to one of its products. And it essentially, when those products were running on Windows machines, it crashed them. It bricked 8.5 million Windows machines around the world. And some of what this underscored is societal reliance on certain pieces of technology, right? This was one bad content update to one product. And that had effects with all kinds of things. There were some areas where 911 services were disrupted or flights and different parts of society. And it was, again, with a lot of cases, sometimes there can be like it seems like sort of a simple issue. In this case, they didn't catch the faulty update. We had another very widespread impact event with Change Healthcare, where that was a cyber attack, and the point of entry was, I believe, a remote desktop protocol that didn't have multi-factor authentication. And just to refresh people's memory on Change Healthcare, this is a subsidiary of United Health Group that is involved in clearinghouse for a large number of medical claims, involved in payments processing. So the effects of it getting disrupted was that a lot of healthcare providers couldn't get paid, couldn't submit claims. You had patients being asked to pay for medication out of pocket. There's accounts of people being asked to pay $1,000 or more. In part, this is, I think, a question of looking at single points of failure, whether that's in an organization or in a sector. whether a technology or a company going down can have these widespread effects. And it speaks to sort of the, I guess, whole of society nature of cyber response.
Let's zoom out just a little bit, and then we'll zoom out some more. But the next increment, let's talk about the increased use of the .gov domain. Not universal for sure in state and local government, but it's been around for 30 years. But 2024 seemed to be a year of jurisdictions coming around saying, yeah, let's get us some of that.
I think one thing that has helped with that is the state and local cybersecurity grant program, which did provide supports and provide a requirement to make this transition. I mean, that can help with website security, can also help with residents knowing that they're going to a legitimate government site. You know, if we're looking forward, the state and local cybersecurity grant program is, there's some questions around its future. I believe it was a 4-year program. I believe it ends in 2025. I know there's been a lot of voices saying it's been helpful to have this money, but it's not enough. And of course, a lot of states was hoping for something that would become recurring. I think there has been some hope that the federal government would renew it. But certainly there's been a question around it, especially under a new administration. Trump's proposed pick for the Department of Homeland Security.
Jewel, during show prep, you mentioned that South Dakota was the only one to consistently refuse the funds. What's up with that?
Some of the complaints of that state government has been that it's regarding it as a wasteful federal spending and having too many requirements and issues like that. So certainly could put the damper on the program getting renewed, but I think it's too early to say.
You mentioned a political transition that we are midway through at this point. At the farthest out Zoom that we're going to do, what should state and local leaders be thinking about, particularly those that have responsibility for securing critical infrastructure, given that things seem fairly fluid at the federal level?
From some people I've been speaking to, we're probably less likely to see a Trump administration try to push minimum cybersecurity requirements than the Biden administration has. There's probably going to be more of an emphasis on voluntary measures and collaborations instead of trying to make a requirement here. But certainly providing supports to water utilities can be helpful. I know New Hampshire is one of the states that has been working to try to do that, to provide, through some collaborations, provide some assessments just to understand where water sector stands, and also provide support with things like training staff and getting some new equipment and software, helping getting supervised control and data acquisition, control boxes that can be patched, or SCADA control boxes, getting maybe new firewalls if that's needed, getting iPads so people aren't using personal devices to try to interface with any equipment here. Things like that can also be helpful.
From the back end and raised floor data centers, network operations, critical infrastructure, let's turn the page and talk digital equity as it matured during 2024 and its prospects for 2025. Julia, back to you. What is the digital equity story?
The digital equity story is that things are continuing. As we know, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed landmark funding for digital equity, and this was a huge federal program. It actually includes several programs, one of which is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. The BEAD program, BEAD funding has been kind of the buzzword in the digital equity space, and we've been seeing steady progress on this program throughout this year. So that includes states getting their digital equity plans approved. It includes them submitting their initial proposals for broadband funding. And now states are starting to be awarded funding through the Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program.
And at the state level, you've written about a number of state-level accessibility initiatives. Give us an overview of those and the ones to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the trend nationwide is that we're seeing governments at both the state and local level increasingly working to make digital services accessible for people with disabilities. And there's two kind of big contributing factors there. One is the rise of digital services in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic start. And The second is that in April, the Department of Justice issued a final ruling under the Americans with Disabilities Act that requires all state and local governments to make digital services accessible for people with disabilities. And this is required in the next 2 or 3 years, depending on jurisdiction size. So to tackle some of these challenges, we're seeing a lot of states are actually increasingly appointing a staff person that is dedicated to digital accessibility or IT accessibility. So in Massachusetts, we have the Chief IT Accessibility Officer. In other states like Pennsylvania, we have the Chief Accessibility Officer. In Texas, we have the Digital Accessibility Program Administrator. So the names kind of vary by state, and so do the approaches. But it is increasingly common for states to be dedicating a specific person or team to making sure that digital services are accessible for all people.
And sometimes, you just want an app for that. And I don't know that this is a silver bullet, but there are apps such as Pocket Talk that seem to be a fairly approachable way forward for jurisdictions that have got a lot to do and not a huge amount of resource to get it done.
Absolutely. There are technology solutions that can help. That is one example. Technologies that can help to translate services for people who don't speak English, technologies that can help provide descriptions for people who have visual impairments. There are all kinds of technology solutions. I mean, and it ranges much further than just technology assistive technologies. So, for example, in New Jersey, the state created an online information hub that's a centralized place for resources and information for people with disabilities. And in Maryland, we're actually seeing executive agency staff getting trained to lead accessible design work within their own agencies. So again, we're seeing a lot of different approaches, and technology can definitely help, but technology can also widen the gap. So when new technologies are implemented, it's really important that the user experience and accessibility experience is considered.
If you had to identify, and this is for both of you, if you had to identify just one or two things that state and local leaders should be on the lookout for during 2025, what would those be?
In the AI space, I think there are two key things that officials need to be focused on investing in, and that's data and education. I think data is the foundation for AI systems, so high quality data and comprehensive data governance is the key to effective AI implementation. And then in the education side, I would say that it's important to both learn about the tools and their potential impact for your constituents, positive and negative. Educate yourself and educate your workforce about how to safely use these technologies, because likely people in your organization are already using these technologies.
Jewel, what do you have?
I think one thing is continuing collaborations with local government. I think one of the great things about the state and local cybersecurity grant program is that it made sure that state and local governments were in communication. And certainly they face a lot of cyber attacks on local government, on schools. And so I think those partnerships are really important to continue. I also think, as we mentioned before, the threat of critical infrastructure, that's pretty serious, right? We've certainly seen nation states pursuing critical infrastructure, right? China-linked hackers have been found in water systems with the belief that they are readying to cause disruption should geopolitical tensions rise. So to the extent that governments can provide supports to their local water systems, I think that also can be great.
I would like to add, in the accessibility space, I think that some key things to remember are that accessibility benefits everyone. And so making digital products and services accessible for people with disabilities is also going to make them more user-friendly to people who don't have disabilities. So not only is it good practice and a legal requirement, but it's also just a good business sense. If you're missing 10 to 15 to 20% of your customers, then you're really missing an opportunity to provide effective government services.
Actually, let's bring you back into the conversation. You were reporting on government experience. What is the state of government experience at the end of 24, and what does it look like for 25 and beyond?
So my cover story this year is really a collection of archetypes that illustrate just how adeptly state and local governments have harnessed technology in 2024. And that could be anything from AI innovations to building these really customer-centric platforms for those they serve. And this all really leads to kind of redefining digital services for residents in particular. I think governments are striving to deliver more accessible, efficient, and secure public services while also navigating challenges challenges like ROI, privacy, and just the way tech is evolving so rapidly these days, as we know here at GovTech. But I think in regards specifically to the Government Experience Awards, you can see this in the winners of this year, like examples of what I just mentioned. So honorees like Arlington County, Virginia CIO Norrin Lee expressed to me when I was interviewing him for the article that customer-centric initiatives really require agility and a commitment to continuous improvement as needs change and capabilities grow. And also, I got the opportunity to interview Massachusetts CIO Jason Snyder. And he let me know, which is pretty interesting, that for 90% of people, their first interaction with Massachusetts state services happens digitally. So they're not going into a brick and mortar building for these public services. And their MassGov single sign-on platform in just a year grew to 1.5 million users with over 500,000 active monthly users. So it really shows that state and local governments are taking notice of the impact that investing in these types of citizen-centered services can have, and they're responding to that.
You mentioned it earlier, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about AI in the context of the evolving government experience space.
The University at Albany and University College London chatbot study that I covered earlier this year back in October provided an analysis of just how governments are using AI chatbots to improve public services. And you discover that these chatbots are optimizing workloads, of course, improving communication, and leading to shorter wait times and really a range of other use cases. But one of the researchers, this was interesting to me, that led the study and talked to many government agencies, said her interviewees noted that a subset of citizens often prefer not to engage with a person at all if a chatbot can effectively address their inquiries. And this sentiment, I think, is supported by another tech event that I was a part of recently, where they talked about, what is the most valuable commodity for residents that many don't think about. And that, of course, is their time, because it's something, we can never get back. So just thinking about which part of the day works for them to get information. And with chatbots, you can usually access those through the web at any time of the day to get the basic information you need. So for those that are working 2 jobs, which many people do nowadays, and may not get to call in or physically go into a place for those services during business hours, that really matters. So that was something that was really interesting involving AI. And there have been, smaller scale, impactful implementations of these customer-centric tech platforms that involve AI. So like the Oregon Division of Driver and Motor Vehicle Services rolling out a scheduling system. And that's the equivalent of having a personal assistant for DMV needs. So, when people go into DMVs, sometimes it can be a little intimidating because you don't know where to go. But this would provide them with a text or email updates about services. So I think any little bit helps when you're trying to integrate AI and trying to make things accessible for residents.
Based on what you just said in your reporting that put all of it into context, we used to try to get this balance between high tech and high touch. As you look into the future and based on the interviews that you've done, does high tech just win because it's more convenient?
It seems to be. I see a lot of people wanting to engage more digitally, and it's been varying examples of that throughout the year, really throughout the past 24 months. I think like I said, people take a lot of note of their time now. So whatever they can do to save time, if that's working through high tech rather than sitting on the phone with someone, or, if you need emergency services and things like that, all of that type of high tech is being integrated into that to kind of triage whatever needs you have that need to be met. So you're speaking to one entity rather than 3 different people. So I think that, high tech is really progressing. And as they get some policies on the book to regulate a lot of this, I think it'll be beneficial moving forward.
Very good. Interesting stuff. Thank you, Ashley.
Oh, thank you. No problem.
Julia, Jewel, thank you too.
Thank you, Paul.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Ashley Silver, Julia Edinger, and Jewel Pattison-Gordon, all from Government Technology. There is much more to their reporting and in the magazine. You can also find it at govtech.com.
Our editorial and production team includes Theo Douglas and Kaylee Tedrow. Our executive editor is Noelle Nell.
Next time out, we put the future of cities in context with a governing cover story. And that will do it for us this time around. For Ashley Silver, I'm Paul Taylor. Thanks for listening. Take care.